They were always the one who stayed the listener, the comforter, the quiet presence, holding everyone else together. You might know this feeling, the invisible weight of being the strong one, the one who understands, forgives, and carries, even when no one asks how you are. At first, it feels noble. To heal is to love. But slowly, something inside begins to ache not from what you've given, but from what you've lost. The more you pour out, the less of you remains. And one day you wake up realizing your compassion has turned against you. This is the healer's curse, when empathy becomes exhaustion and love becomes self-abandonment. In this story, we journey through the healer's silent descent, how their gift became their prison, and how the act of saving others became a way to avoid saving themselves. But this isn't a tragedy, it's a remembering, a return to balance where compassion no longer costs your soul. Because the truth is, you were never meant to heal the world by losing yourself in it. You were meant to heal through yourself by finally turning your own light inward. It always begins with a wound, not a visible one, not something that bleeds, but a quiet, invisible tear inside the soul. Something breaks early on, and instead of turning bitter, the healer turns soft. They decide, often without words, that if they can take away the pain of others, maybe the world will hurt a little less. Maybe they will hurt a little less. That's how it starts, with a child who feels too much, the one who notices when their parents are tired, when a friend's smile hides sadness, when a room changes energy the moment someone walks in. While others look away, the healer leans closer. They listen, they care, and somewhere deep down, they make a silent promise. I'll make it better. At first, this feels like love, pure, selfless, beautiful. Every small act of kindness becomes a way to fill the silence of their own pain. But over time, compassion turns into a habit, and the habit becomes identity. They stop asking what they need. They only ask who they can help next. It's easy to mistake this for strength. People admire the healer, they call them wise, mature, kind, beyond their years. But what no one sees is the exhaustion behind the calm smile. What no one asks is what happens when the healer has no one to heal them. Their wound doesn't vanish. It just hides behind everyone else's. Each person they help becomes another patch over the places where they feel empty. And though their heart expands, their center quietly fades. There's a strange comfort in being needed. It makes them feel safe, important, loved. But needing to be needed is the seed of the curse. Because when the healer can't fix someone, when their light isn't enough, they start to feel worthless. Their love turns into labor. Their empathy becomes a cage. Still, they can't stop. It's as if the pain of others calls to something ancient in them, the same ache that once called them to mend. They rush toward suffering the way a moth rushes toward flame, believing that saving others will save themselves. But beneath all their giving, there's a whisper, a faint, trembling voice that says, "You, too, are wounded." The healer hears it sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the mask of strength slips away. Yet they turn from it because tending to themselves feels selfish, almost wrong. They don't know it yet, but this is the beginning of the curse. When love becomes a duty, when compassion becomes a way to disappear. And so, their story begins not with triumph, but with tenderness, a tenderness so deep it hurts. They believe they are mending the world, but really, they are chasing the piece of themselves that was lost the day they first decided everyone else's pain mattered more than their own. Some people move through life untouched voices, moods, and moments passing through them like wind through glass. But not the healer. For them, every word carries weight. Every silence hums with emotion. They don't just hear pain, they feel it. It settles in their chest as if it were their own. They walk into a room and sense everything. The unspoken tension, the hidden grief, the quiet smiles pretending to be fine. To others, it looks like intuition. To the healer, it feels like carrying invisible luggage that isn't theirs to hold. From a young age, they learn to listen between the lines, to pick up the sadness behind a parent's laughter, the worry behind a friend's joke. They became translators of emotion, reading the energy beneath words. And at first, it felt magical. Their empathy was like a superpower. People trusted them, opened up to them, poured their stories into their open hands. But no one told them that gifts can become burdens. Because when you feel everything, there's nowhere to hide. You don't get to turn off the noise. You carry everyone's sorrow home, like invisible dust clinging to your skin. And even when you lie in bed at night, trying to rest, your mind replays all the hurts that aren't yours, the look in someone's eyes, the tone that cracked, the pain that lingered in the air. It's beautiful, and it's heavy. Empathy can make you gentle, wise, and loving, but it can also drown you if you forget to breathe for yourself. The healer begins to notice how their mood shifts with the people around them. When others are sad, they feel drained. When others are angry, they shrink. When others are joyful, they glow, but only for a moment, until the next wave of emotion arrives. Their peace depends on the temperature of the room. They start to confuse sensitivity with responsibility. They believe that if they can sense pain, they must fix it. If someone feels broken, it must be their job to make them whole. But that belief slowly chains them to everyone they meet. Sometimes, they wish they could stop feeling so deeply. They wish they could walk through life the way others seem to, untouched, unshaken, free. Yet, even as they wish that, they know they never could. Because beneath the weight, there's still beauty in their gift, the way they can look at someone and see them, really see them, beyond all the masks. Still, a truth is forming quietly inside them, one they haven't yet learned to accept. Sensitivity isn't meant to be a wound that never heals. It's meant to be a compass, a guide. But until they learn that, empathy will continue to blur the line between love and self-loss. The healer will keep absorbing the storms of others, not realizing that their gift, this sacred, fragile sensitivity, was never meant to save everyone else. It was meant to teach them how to finally feel themselves. It begins in the smallest moments, a tone of voice, a slammed door, a silence that lasts too long. The healer learns early that peace is fragile and love can vanish without warning. So they start to study people like a map. They watch, listen, and learn the rules of safety. What makes others smile? What keeps them calm? What stops the storm before it starts? They discover that kindness brings approval, helping earns warmth, being quiet keeps the peace. Every gentle act becomes a form of protection. When someone frowns, they rush to fix it. When someone hurts, they make themselves smaller so others can feel bigger. And slowly, without even noticing, they trade authenticity for acceptance. To survive, they learn to please. It isn't manipulation, it's instinct. A child's way of staying loved. Every, "Are you okay?" and "I'll help" becomes a secret spell to hold the world together. But behind each act of care hides a quiet fear. If I stop giving, will they still stay? That question follows them like a shadow. It shapes the way they move, speak, even think. They begin to measure their worth in how others feel around them. A calm parent means they're good. A smiling friend means they matter. They don't yet realize this is the seed of self-abandonment, that they are learning to disappear, one small kindness at a time. As they grow, people start to call them mature for their age, so kind, so thoughtful, and they are. But underneath those compliments, something is quietly breaking. Because when your role is to comfort everyone else, you forget what it's like to be comforted yourself. Sometimes they want to cry or scream, but they hold it in. They don't want to cause trouble. They don't want to be another problem to fix. So they swallow their pain and turn it into empathy. Every unspoken hurt becomes another reason to help someone else heal. They don't realize that their compassion has become currency, a way to buy love, peace, and belonging. It works. For a while. People adore them. They become the friend everyone calls, the child everyone relies on, the person who always understands. But the cost is high, because deep down, they start to lose track of who they are when no one needs them. They forget what it feels like to be loved for existing, not for giving. That's the early lesson every wounded healer learns, that care can keep you safe, but it can also keep you small. They don't know yet that the safety they built from pleasing others will one day become a prison. For now, they just keep smiling, helping, fixing, believing that if they can love hard enough, they'll never be left behind again. But in truth, they've already begun leaving themselves behind. At some point, the healer learns to smile even when it hurts. It's not a fake smile, it's practiced, gentle, believable, the kind of smile that makes people feel safe. It becomes their shield, their disguise, their silent promise that everything is okay, even when it isn't. They wear it so well that no one suspects how tired they are. The world sees a calm, giving soul, someone who always knows what to say, who always has time, who never complains. But behind that soft expression, the healer hides a growing emptiness. Every time they say, "I'm fine," they lose a little more of what's real. They begin to master the art of disappearing in plain sight. When they feel sad, they turn it into care. When they feel lonely, they pour that ache into helping someone else. Their mask isn't built from lies, it's built from love. But love, when used as armor, starts to suffocate the heart it was meant to protect. People call them strong, dependable, the rock. But strength without rest turns into numbness. Dependability without boundaries becomes erasure. They don't notice it at first. Because the mask works, it keeps people close. It keeps peace intact. But peace built on pretense isn't peace at all. It's survival dressed as serenity. The healer learns that the world rewards selflessness. The more they give, the more they're praised. And so they give more, until giving becomes the only way they know how to exist. They keep the mask polished and bright, because beneath it, they fear what might be seen. The sadness, the fatigue, the longing to be held instead of holding. There are moments when the mask slips, a quiet night, an empty room, the weight of silence pressing against their chest. For a heartbeat, the smile fades, and they see their reflection, not the glowing caretaker, but the forgotten self beneath. It scares them, that glimpse of truth. So they fix the mask again, quickly, before anyone notices. But the longer they wear it, the heavier it becomes. What once made them loved now makes them invisible. People see their light, not their struggle. They come for comfort, not connection. And the healer, desperate to be understood, only shines brighter, hoping someone will see through the glow and find the person hidden inside. Yet no one does, not yet, because the mask is too convincing. This is the quiet tragedy of the healer. Their compassion becomes camouflage. They forget that it's okay to need, to rest, to cry, They start believing that love only flows in one direction, outward. And so, while everyone else feels healed by their presence, the healer's center quietly fades. The light that once came from truth is now powered by obligation. They keep shining for everyone else, never realizing that the one person who needs their own warmth the most has been waiting behind the mask all along. There's a heaviness that follows the healer wherever they go, a quiet ache they can't quite name. It lingers after every conversation, every comforting word, every person they help. It's not their pain, yet it feels like it belongs to them. Every unhealed soul they've touched has left a trace, like fingerprints on glass, invisible but impossible to wipe away. At first, they don't notice. They think the exhaustion means they're doing something right, that the weight is proof of love. After all, isn't caring supposed to hurt a little? Isn't sacrifice what makes it real? They confuse depletion with purpose, believing that the more they give, the more they're worth. So they keep showing up. They listen to everyone's stories, absorb every heartbreak, carry every burden like it's sacred. They can't bear to see anyone suffer, so they take it all in, quietly, almost willingly. They mistake empathy for endurance, but the truth is, no one can hold that much sorrow and stay whole. The healer starts to feel tired in ways sleep can't fix. They wake heavy, even after rest, as if someone's sadness is still clinging to them. Their laughter feels quieter now, their silence longer. They don't tell anyone it feels wrong to complain when others have it worse. So they hide their weariness behind kind eyes and steady words. People thank them for always being there. They say, "You're such a good person," and the healer smiles, pretending that being good doesn't sometimes feel like being buried alive. But deep down, they wonder if kindness is supposed to feel this lonely. Every story they hear leaves an imprint: a friend's breakup, a stranger's grief, a parent's regret. The healer carries them all, like echoes that never fade. Sometimes, when they're alone, they hear those echoes whispering back, not in words, but in feelings: sadness, guilt, longing, confusion. Their own emotions become tangled with everyone else's until they can't tell which pain is theirs anymore. Still, they keep going. They think it's noble. They think it's love. But what they don't realize is that they've begun to equate pain with goodness. If they're tired, it must mean they care deeply. If they're hurting, it must mean they're doing something right. The curse deepens quietly, disguised as compassion. One night, they finally stop. The world is still. The noise fades. And for a moment, they feel the weight of every soul they've carried. It's beautiful, but unbearable, like holding the whole ocean in their chest. That's when the truth begins to whisper. Not all pain needs to be held. Not every wound needs your hands. But the healer doesn't know how to let go yet. They've worn their sorrow like a badge for so long that without it, they're not sure who they'd be. So they take a deep breath, smile again, and keep walking, never realizing that the heaviest burdens they carry are the ones they were never meant to pick up at all. There's a secret thrill that comes with saving someone. The healer doesn't talk about it, but they feel it, that rush, when a broken soul softens under their care, when a hurting heart starts to heal because of them. It feels like purpose, like proof that they matter, like love. They don't realize it yet, but helping has become their favorite escape. It's how they silence their own pain. Every time they lift someone else, they feel lighter too. Every thank you, every tear, every "I don't know what I'd do without you" becomes fuel. It's not pride, it's survival. Because if they're helping, they don't have to face what's hurting inside themselves. But slowly, the act of rescuing starts to feel like a need. They seek out people who are wounded, drawn to them like a moth to fire. They see someone struggling, and something in them lights up an urge to fix, to soothe, to save. They believe they're following love, but what they're really chasing is validation. When someone they help begins to heal and no longer needs them, the healer feels strangely empty. Instead of peace, there's loss. Without someone to rescue, they feel invisible, like their worth disappears the moment they're not needed. And so they find someone new to help, another person to pour into, another soul to save. The cycle repeats, dressed as compassion but rooted in fear. They begin to confuse connection with crisis. Calm feels foreign. They trust intensity more than stillness, chaos more than ease, because being the rescuer gives them a role, a sense of control in a world that once felt unpredictable. They can't stand watching someone suffer, not only because they care, but because it awakens the helplessness they've spent a lifetime running from. And yet, the more they rescue, the more trapped they become. They start entering relationships where they are the giver, the fixer, the healer, but never the one truly seen. They find comfort in people who are lost, because helping them feels like home. But homes built on saving others always collapse. Sometimes they wonder why they keep attracting pain, why the people they love always seem to be broken. They don't realize it's because brokenness makes them feel useful, needed, important. It gives them identity. But healing someone else doesn't heal the healer. It only deepens the void. Because every time they fix another's wound, they move further from their own. Their hands are always full of other people's pain, leaving no room to hold their own heart. There will come a day when they look around and see that they've built their entire sense of worth on being a savior. And in that moment, the truth will finally surface that what they thought was love was really a plea for meaning. Helping was never the problem. It was the way they used it to avoid being the one who needed saving all along. There comes a moment when helping stops feeling like choice. It becomes a duty, a quiet burden that sits in the healer's chest. They no longer ask, "Should I help?" They simply do, automatically, instinctively, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. They start to give in ways that cost them more than they realize. Their time, their energy, their peace, all traded for the comfort of others. When someone is angry, they absorb it. When someone is broken, they become the glue. When someone is lost, they become the light. But while everyone else is being saved, the healer begins to vanish. Their heart is no longer their own. It belongs to whoever needs it most that day. They don't notice the slow erosion of self, how every yes chips away at the voice that once whispered no. They call it love. They call it compassion. But it's sacrifice, endless, quiet, unquestioned sacrifice. They tell themselves it's noble, that real goodness means giving everything, that being tired means they're doing something right. But deep down, a small voice trembles. When did caring become dying by degrees? The healer starts to feel hollow. Their smiles still shine, their hands still give, but the warmth behind them flickers. They begin to run on empty, convincing themselves that this emptiness is the price of love. They believe that being a good person means enduring the pain of others without complaint, that their own needs are distractions from the mission of healing. Sometimes they imagine laying down the burden, stepping away from everyone's pain, just for a while. But guilt grips them immediately. If they rest, who will help? If they stop, who will fall apart? So they keep carrying, keep giving, keep fighting battles that were never theirs to begin with. People call them selfless, but that's the tragedy. They've taken it literally. They've become without self. And though their compassion looks holy, it begins to turn heavy, almost dark. They start to resent the ones they help, not because they don't care, but because they feel invisible within their own love. They would never say it out loud, but deep inside, they wonder if anyone would notice if they stopped being the strong one, if they stopped being the one who always shows up, who always understands. They long for someone to look at them and see the fatigue behind their kindness, to say, "You don't have to hold it all." But no one does, because the healer hides too well. They keep shining while they slowly fade. This is the shadow of martyrdom, when love turns into self-erasure, when compassion becomes a quiet kind of death. They give everything, thinking that's what makes them worthy. But the truth is, love never asked them to disappear. That was the lie they told themselves, the lie that kindness meant burning so others could feel warm. There comes a quiet shift, one that feels almost like betrayal. The healer begins to see something they never wanted to admit. Not everyone wants to be healed. Some people just want to be held in their pain, not lifted from it. Some only want the comfort, not the change. And the healer, so used to saving, starts to notice how their light is being used not to guide others forward, but to keep them from ever having to move. It's a painful realization. The same hands that once helped now feel trapped in the same patterns, over and over. The healer starts to see that their compassion has been mistaken for permission for others to stay small, to stay dependent, to never face their own shadow. They thought they were freeing people, but sometimes they were keeping them exactly where they were. They begin to sense something darker beneath the surface. They start to see how their own need to help is tied to control. Every time they fix someone, it gives them purpose. Every time they rescue, it keeps the balance in their favor, the healer as savior, the other as saved. It feels kind, but underneath it all, there's fear. Fear of being unneeded. Fear of being irrelevant. Fear of facing their own chaos if they stop managing everyone else's. And so compassion becomes something else, a subtle form of control. It's never meant to be cruel. It comes from love, from longing, from good intentions. But even good intentions can cast long shadows. When the healer steps into someone's pain without invitation, they take away that person's power to rise on their own. They mistake saving for loving, not realizing that real love gives others the space to struggle, to fail, to find strength without rescue. There's guilt in this realization. The healer doesn't want to see themselves as manipulative. The word feels harsh, almost unfair. But when they look closely, they see the truth in it, that sometimes, by always being needed, they've been keeping others from growing. That sometimes, their care is a quiet way of making sure they never have to feel useless. It hurts to see their kindness reflected back with such complexity. To realize that light, too, can cast shadows. They start to question, have I been helping people? Or have I been trying to fix what I'm afraid to feel in myself? This mirror is hard to face, but it's also freeing, because the moment the healer sees this truth, they begin to understand that love doesn't mean taking away someone's pain. It means trusting them to walk through it. So the healer steps back, trembling but awake. For the first time, they see that even compassion can become a cage when it's used to control. And the greatest act of kindness they can offer now is to let others find their own way, while they finally begin the work of freeing themselves. At first, the healer thinks it's just tiredness, a few sleepless nights, a fog that won't lift, a body that feels heavier than it should. They tell themselves it's normal that everyone gets drained sometimes. But this feels different. The exhaustion doesn't go away with rest. It settles into their bones like a quiet rebellion, like their body is whispering something they've refused to hear. The signs grow louder. The heart races for no reason. The chest tightens when another cry for help arrives. Their stomach twists when they try to say no. Even small tasks, start to feel like mountains. The healer has spent years carrying the emotions of others, but now it's their own body that begins to collapse under the weight. Fatigue becomes constant. Anxiety becomes a language. Illness becomes a message. You can't keep doing this. But they try anyway. They push through the heaviness, drinking more coffee, sleeping less, smiling harder. They remind themselves that people are counting on them, that to rest would be selfish. So they keep going until their body stops asking and starts demanding. Headaches turn into migraines. Emptiness turns into numbness. The mind grows foggy, unfocused, distant. The body, once obedient, begins to revolt. It's a strange betrayal to have your own body rise against you. But it isn't punishment. It's truth trying to break through. The soul can't sustain what the ego keeps promising. The healer's spirit is tired of pretending it's infinite. It's tired of being pushed past its limits in the name of goodness. They begin to notice small moments of collapse, forgetting simple things, crying for no reason, feeling dizzy after helping one too many people. The body speaks softly at first, but the healer, so used to ignoring their own needs, keeps silencing it. They treat their exhaustion like an inconvenience instead of a warning. And yet, the body never lies. It becomes the messenger that the mind refuses to be. It whispers what the healer has always known, but never admitted, that you can't pour from an empty vessel, no matter how noble the cause. One evening, the healer finally stops. They sit in the stillness and feel it, all the ache in their chest, the trembling in their hands, the dull sadness behind their smile. For once, they don't try to fix it. They just listen. In that quiet, they realize their body has been trying to save them all along. Every symptom, every fatigue, every anxiety was not failure. It was a plea for balance, a cry for care. The healer understands now. The body isn't the enemy. It's the truth teller. It's the part of them that refuses to keep lying for the sake of appearances. It's the soul's final attempt to say, you cannot heal others by breaking yourself. And beneath that truth, something begins to soften. The healer takes a deep breath, for themselves this time, and finally hears the lesson their body had been speaking all along. It's time to rest. There comes a point when even the strongest heart grows tired of holding everything together. The healer reaches that place quietly, not with a scream, but with silence. One morning, they wake and feel nothing. No drive to help, no spark to comfort, no strength to keep giving. The love that once poured so freely from them now feels dry and distant, like a well that's run out of water. They try to keep going, out of habit. They smile. They listen. They offer the same gentle words they always have, but something inside no longer moves. Their giving has lost its meaning. What once felt holy now feels hollow. The warmth that used to flow through them has turned cold. They begin to notice how one-sided it's all been, how often they've shown up for others who never noticed when they were breaking. How many times they've comforted someone at midnight and gone to bed feeling completely alone. The healer, who once found identity in being needed, now feels invisible. They gave everything they had, and still, somehow, it was never enough. That realization cuts deeper than any wound. For so long, they believed love was about sacrifice, about showing up no matter what, about holding others through their pain. But now, all that devotion feels like betrayal, not of others but of themselves. They start to wonder if anyone ever truly saw them, or if people only saw what they provided. The healer's hands have held so many, but who has held them? Their voice has soothed countless hearts, but who has ever listened when they trembled? These questions echo in the silence like a haunting refrain, and with each unanswered one, the despair grows heavier. The world around them starts to lose color. The things that once brought peace, music, laughter, sunlight, feel dim and distant. It's not that they want to stop caring. It's that caring has stopped making sense. The more they give, the emptier they feel. And then, for the first time, they let themselves cry. Not the polite kind of tears that come from empathy, but the raw kind, the kind that come from realizing how long they've been running on love that was never returned. In those tears lies truth. They finally see that they've been giving from a place of fear, fear of being forgotten, fear of not being enough, fear that without their kindness, they have no value. But love that costs your peace isn't love, it's self-erasure dressed as devotion. The healer lies still for a while, staring at the ceiling, feeling the ache of 1,000 unspoken goodbyes. For the first time, they don't reach for anyone. They just sit with the emptiness. And slowly, something shifts. Beneath the despair, there's a faint whisper, the faintest spark of self that says, "You're still here." The meaning hasn't disappeared. It's only waiting to be rebuilt, not through others this time, but through the quiet act of turning that same love inward. When everything finally falls quiet, the healer finds themselves in unfamiliar territory, a silence that feels almost too big to bear. The noise of other people's lives, the constant cries for help, the endless need to be needed, it's all gone. At first, it feels peaceful, like stepping into fresh air after years of smoke. But soon, that peace turns sharp. The quiet begins to echo, and in its echo, the healer hears something they've avoided their whole life, their own pain. There's no one left to save now, no one to distract them from themselves. The hands that once reached outward hang empty. The heart that once beat for others now beats into stillness, forcing them to listen. It's here, in this unsettling calm, that the truth begins to rise. They start to see it, how every act of kindness was also a form of escape. Helping others wasn't only compassion, it was survival, a way to stay distracted from the aching emptiness they carried inside. Each person they saved became a mirror, reflecting back the parts of themselves they couldn't face. Every wound they tended in someone else was a wound they were too afraid to touch within their own soul. It's a humbling realization that healing others was never just about love, but also about avoidance. That their endless compassion was a way of keeping their own pain quiet. Now, without anyone else's chaos to drown it out, that buried sorrow finally speaks. At first, they resist it. They tell themselves it's just exhaustion. But the silence keeps pressing in, soft, yet unrelenting. It asks questions they've spent years dodging. Who are you when no one needs you? What happens when there's nothing left to fix? The answers come slowly, painfully. They see memories they'd rather forget, the loneliness they felt as a child, the fear of not being enough, the desperate longing to be loved without earning it. Those memories don't shout, they whisper. And somehow, that whisper cuts deeper than any scream. For days, maybe weeks, the healer does nothing but sit in this stillness. No fixing, no rescuing, just breathing, listening, feeling. It's strange at first, this idea of tending to themselves. They've spent so long pouring their energy outward that turning it inward feels selfish, almost wrong. But with each small breath, something inside begins to soften. They begin to realize that the love they've been searching for in others was always meant to start here, in this quiet room, in this still heart, in this forgotten self. The silence that once felt unbearable starts to become sacred. It's no longer empty, it's honest. And in that honesty, healing begins, not the kind they gave to others, but the kind they'd been denying themselves. The healer finally understands. They weren't just helping others to be kind. They were helping to avoid the one person they were most afraid to meet themselves. And now, at last, there's nowhere left to run. It's strange, the way the truth reveals itself not in thunder or lightning, but in a quiet realization that settles slowly into the heart. The healer, sitting in the stillness they once feared, begins to see a pattern they had never noticed before. Every person they helped, every wound they tried to mend, carried a reflection of something deeply familiar. The sadness in others, the fear, the loneliness, all of it mirrored something they had buried long ago. They start to see that every act of healing was never just about compassion. It was also a cry for recognition. Every time they soothed another's pain, they were secretly begging for someone to soothe theirs. Every time they made someone feel seen, they were hoping without words that someone might finally see them too. It's an unsettling discovery. For years, they believed their kindness was pure, and it was, but it was also driven by something older, more fragile. Beneath all the love, there was a wound that had never truly closed. The wound of not being comforted when they needed it most. The wound of growing up believing that love must be earned through giving, never simply received by being. Now, that wound stands before them unhidden, undeniable. It's not the kind of pain that screams. It's the kind that hums softly beneath everything, shaping choices, bending dreams, guiding them toward people who would keep the pattern alive. The healer begins to see how often they've chased those who couldn't love them back fully, how often they've mistaken being needed for being valued. They realize that their greatest acts of healing were also their most quiet confessions. When they comforted others, it was as if they were trying to reach back through time to hold the younger version of themselves, who cried quietly into the pillow, who learned to smile through fear, who thought love only stayed when it was useful. Every soul they've ever saved was, in some way, another attempt to save that forgotten child. This understanding hurts, but it also liberates, because now they see clearly. Their empathy wasn't weakness, and their need to help wasn't wrong. It was love misdirected, but love all the same. It was the soul's attempt to heal itself through the world. And for the first time, they don't try to run from that wounded part of themselves. They let it speak. They let it cry. They let it finally exist without shame. The healer sits with the ache, not as a savior, but as a witness. And in that sacred stillness, something shifts. They no longer need to find themselves in others' pain. They no longer need to prove their worth through mending, because now they understand the wound within the wound was never a flaw to fix. It was the doorway home. In the quiet that follows the truth, the healer feels something stir deep within a presence, fragile and small, waiting to be seen. It's not another person this time. It's someone they once were. The air feels different, softer, like the moment before tears. They close their eyes, and there, in the dim light of memory, they meet the one they left behind, the child who first believed that love was earned through self-erasure. The child stands in silence, eyes wide with the same innocence the healer remembers but hasn't felt in years. There's no anger there, only confusion, a kind of aching question that has waited too long for an answer. Why did you leave me? The healer doesn't know what to say. How do you explain a lifetime of pretending to be strong? How do you tell your younger self that you spent years trying to earn love because you never believed you deserved it freely? The child doesn't need explanations, though. They just need to be seen, really seen. And so, for the first time, the healer kneels not before another person, not in service to someone else's pain, but before their own forgotten heart. They look into the eyes of that small self and finally understand where it all began. The need to fix, the drive to give, The exhaustion of always being good. It all started here, in the tender, trembling heart of a child who learned that the only way to stay safe was to disappear. The memories come back in flashes. The moments when they stayed quiet to keep the peace. The times they smiled while breaking inside. The nights they felt invisible, but tried harder to please anyway. That child carried it all, the fear, the loneliness, the belief that being selfless was the price of belonging. Tears come, slow and steady. The healer reaches out, trembling, and the child steps closer. It feels like touching a ghost made of light, fragile but real. And as they hold this small version of themselves, something inside begins to mend. Not through effort, not through trying to fix, but through presence. They whisper softly, almost afraid the words will vanish. You don't have to disappear anymore. You were never unworthy. You were never too much. The child listens, eyes wide, as if hearing a language they always knew, but forgot how to speak. In that moment, the healer realizes something profound. The one they were always trying to save through others, through endless giving, was this small, forgotten self. Every act of kindness, every attempt to mend the broken, was a reflection of their longing to come home to this innocent part within. As they embrace the child, the silence changes. It no longer feels empty. It feels alive, whole. The healer breathes deeply, and for the first time in their life, the love they give doesn't flow outward, it circles back. It returns to where it was always meant to go. At first, the healer mistakes it for sadness, that tightness in the chest, that tremble under the skin. But as it rises, it burns hotter, sharper. It's not grief this time, it's anger. A fierce, pulsing kind of anger that feels ancient, like it's been waiting in the dark for years to be heard. The healer doesn't know what to do with it. They've spent a lifetime being gentle, patient, kind. Anger has always felt wrong, dangerous, something that belongs to others, not to them. They've comforted angry people, forgiven them, softened them, but they've never allowed themselves to feel it. They thought being good meant being calm. They thought love meant never raising their voice, never saying enough. Now, all the unsaid no's begin to scream from inside. Every time they stayed quiet to keep the peace, every time they gave when they were empty, every time they said yes when their soul was begging them to stop. The body remembers what the mouth never spoke. And the healer, for the first time, feels the full weight of that betrayal, not from others, but from themselves. It's disorienting. They don't know whether to cry or to yell. They feel ashamed of the fire inside them, yet they can't deny how alive it feels. This is not the cruel kind of anger that destroys. It's the sacred kind, the kind that breaks chains. It's the voice of the forgotten self, finally saying, I mattered too. The healer starts to see how deeply they've confused peace with suppression. They thought harmony meant silence, that love meant always yielding. But the cost of that false peace was themselves. They became the buffer for everyone's chaos, absorbing storms that were never theirs to weather. And now, that old pattern cracks wide open. The rage isn't aimed at anyone in particular. It's not about revenge or blame. It's about reclaiming space that was lost. It's the body and soul saying together, no more. No more shrinking. No more rescuing as a way to be loved. No more disappearing to keep others comfortable. They let the anger move through them, shaking, crying, breathing. It feels wild, unfamiliar, and strangely cleansing. Each wave washes away another layer of guilt. For the first time, the healer feels what strength actually is. Not endless endurance, but the courage to honor themselves. In that raw, trembling moment, something powerful shifts. The healer realizes that their anger was never the enemy. It was the compass pointing them back to truth. It had been there all along, waiting beneath the kindness, beneath the fatigue, beneath the mask. They sit in the stillness after the storm of it, chest rising, heart steady, and in that quiet they whisper to themselves, not as a caretaker, but as a survivor. I forgive you for abandoning me. I'm here now. I won't leave again. The rage fades into something gentler, not peace through suppression, but peace through truth. The healer has finally stopped turning their power against themselves. The healer always thought love meant saying yes, yes to helping, yes to understanding, yes to holding space even when they had none left. No felt cruel, selfish, like shutting the door on someone's pain. But after the rage, after the tears, after the years of giving until they vanished, something begins to change. It starts quietly, a small moment, almost invisible. Someone asks for their time, their energy, their comfort, and instead of automatically agreeing, the healer pauses. The silence between question and answer stretches long enough for them to feel their own body, their heartbeat, their fatigue, their truth. And from that space, a word rises that once felt impossible. No. It isn't loud or angry. It isn't sharp. It's steady, honest. It feels like an exhale after years of holding their breath. For a moment, they expect punishment, rejection, guilt, the old fear that love will vanish if they stop giving. But nothing terrible happens. The world doesn't end. The other person simply nods. Life goes on. And in that small, sacred moment, the healer realizes something extraordinary. Boundaries are not barriers. They are bridges. Bridges between self and soul, between care and balance. They are not a way of keeping people out, but of keeping truth in. They begin to understand that saying no is not an act of cruelty, but of clarity. It's a way of saying, I will not abandon myself again, because love without boundaries becomes obligation, and compassion without edges becomes exhaustion. The healer starts to practice this new language of limits. At first, it feels strange, like learning to walk again. The guilt still whispers, you're letting them down. You should be stronger. But the guilt is just the echo of the old wound, the one that believed love was earned through sacrifice. They breathe through it. They keep going. Soon, they start to notice how boundaries create space for honesty. Their relationships begin to shift. Some fade. Some deepen. The ones built on dependence start to crumble, but the ones built on truth grow stronger. Where they once felt drained, they now feel alive. Where they once felt needed, they now feel respected. The healer learns that no can be an act of love not only for themselves, but for others. Because when they stop rescuing everyone, they give people the dignity to grow. They realize that protecting their peace doesn't mean they've stopped caring. It means they've started caring correctly. Each boundary becomes a prayer, a gentle promise whispered to the universe. Let my love be balanced. Let my giving be honest. Let me stay whole as I serve. And as they speak these quiet prayers into their life, something miraculous happens. Their compassion deepens, not because they give more, but because what they give now comes from fullness, not fear. The healer, for the first time, loves without losing themselves. And that simple, sacred word, no, becomes the doorway to their truest yes. There comes a time when even light needs to rest, when the healer, after years of carrying others, feels the pull to turn inward. It isn't loneliness they seek, but quiet. A different kind of silence, not the empty kind that once haunted them, but the healing kind, where their own breath becomes a song again. They don't retreat to escape the world. They retreat to remember who they are without the noise of everyone else's needs. At first, The quiet feels strange. The healer's days, once filled with messages, voices, and emotions that weren't theirs, now stretch wide and still. There are no crises to solve, no energy to absorb, just space vast, unfamiliar, almost unsettling. Their hands, always so busy holding others, now tremble with stillness. But beneath the discomfort, something deeper begins to rise, a calm curiosity. In solitude, they start to hear the faint hum of their own soul again. They notice small things, the sound of wind against glass, the rhythm of their heartbeat, the way sunlight spills across the floor. For the first time in years, they aren't trying to be anyone's anchor. They are simply here, breathing, existing. They begin to understand that healing isn't always found in connection. Sometimes it's found in disconnection, in stepping away from the noise long enough to hear the truth underneath it. Each day of silence peels away another layer of obligation, revealing something soft and forgotten beneath: peace. The healer starts to realize that solitude was never the enemy. It was the medicine they'd been avoiding. In the quiet, they no longer have to perform. They no longer have to be the strong one. They can cry without comforting themselves. They can rest without earning it. They can finally feel without filtering. There are moments of ache, of course, moments when they miss being needed, when they wonder if anyone notices their absence. But then, they remember how much of themselves they lost by being constantly seen, but never truly known. This time alone isn't punishment, it's return. As the days pass, they find a strange joy in simplicity, making tea, watching clouds drift, listening to the quiet hum of their own thoughts. They start to meet themselves the way they once met others, with patience, with empathy, with tenderness. And slowly, what once felt like isolation begins to feel like sanctuary. The healer learns that solitude doesn't mean disconnection. It means reconnection to soul, to self, to silence. It's the pause between heartbeats that lets the rhythm return stronger. For the first time, they aren't saving anyone. They aren't fixing, helping, or mending. They are simply allowing themselves to be whole again. And in that sacred stillness, they realize something simple yet profound. They were never running from people. They were running from the parts of themselves that had been waiting in the quiet all along. There is a softness to this season, a gentleness that the healer once believed they didn't deserve. For so long, they lived in service to others, scattering pieces of their energy across countless hearts and endless stories. Every person they helped carried away a small fragment of them. They gave so much that they forgot what it felt like to feel full. But now, in the stillness of their withdrawal, something beautiful begins to happen. The fragments start to return. It happens quietly, like light seeping back through cracks in a wall. The more they rest, the more they breathe, the more they stop chasing other people's healing, the more their own spirit begins to gather itself again. At first, it feels unfamiliar. They're not used to keeping their energy. They've always felt valuable through giving. But now, they start to see value in simply being. They sleep deeply. They wake without rushing. They take long walks without needing to answer anyone's call. They sit under the sky and let the world hold them for once. Each moment of peace feels like an invisible hand, returning something they once lost: laughter, calm, clarity, self-trust. The very things they thought were gone forever begin to rise quietly within them again. They notice how light their body feels when it isn't heavy with other people's emotions, how much easier their breath comes when it isn't trying to hold someone else's pain. Their soul begins to glow again, not brightly, not dramatically, but steadily, like a candle that refuses to go out. There's still guilt sometimes. The old voice whispers, "You should be doing more. Someone needs you." But the healer smiles at that voice now. They understand that caring doesn't always mean intervening. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for the world and for yourself is to recharge the light that gives meaning to everything you do. They start to see how much of life they missed while trying to hold everything together. The color of leaves, the sound of laughter that isn't born from obligation, the comfort of doing nothing at all. These small, ordinary joys become sacred again. Every deep breath, every quiet morning, every undisturbed night feels like reclaiming a lost part of themselves. And as their energy returns, so does their intuition. The healer begins to see clearly where they once blurred. They can tell the difference between genuine care and emotional dependency, between giving from love and giving from fear. The fog lifts, and what remains is strength, not the kind that burns out, but the kind that endures. Piece by piece, they come home to themselves. Each moment of rest is not laziness, but resurrection. Each boundary, each breath, each pause is a way of saying, I am mine again. And for the first time in their life, their energy doesn't rush out to fix the world. It settles within calm, grounded, radiant, as if their soul has finally remembered its own shape. Guilt has followed the healer like a shadow for as long as they can remember. It whispered in every quiet moment, you should be helping, you should be doing more. Even in rest, they could feel its weight pressing on their chest, that uneasy feeling that to take care of themselves meant taking something away from someone else. But as their energy slowly returns, something inside them begins to shift. They start to see guilt for what it truly is, not a sign of goodness, but a chain forged by misunderstanding. They begin to remember how it started. The first time they said no and felt the sting of rejection. The first time they disappointed someone by putting themselves first. The world taught them early that love was earned through sacrifice, that comfort came only to those who gave endlessly. And so, guilt became their constant companion, the invisible leash that pulled them back every time they tried to rest. Now, in the quiet of their healing, they begin to question that belief. They notice how strange it is that the same love they gave so freely to others felt wrong to give themselves. They start small, choosing sleep over obligation, choosing silence over explanation, choosing nourishment over depletion. Each choice feels both terrifying and freeing, like stepping across an invisible line they were never supposed to cross. The guilt doesn't vanish overnight. It still whispers, still lingers, but the healer begins to talk back. They remind themselves that care given from emptiness isn't care at all. That true compassion, the kind that uplifts, not drains, can only come from a whole and rested heart. Slowly, that truth begins to rewrite the old programming. One afternoon, they stand in front of a mirror and realize something simple but profound. They deserve the same tenderness they give to everyone else, the same patience, the same forgiveness, the same time. They've spent years pouring love outward like a river with no return. Now, they let some of that love flow back to its source. And instead of guilt, what they feel is relief, a deep exhale that seems to come from their soul itself. They begin to see self-care not as retreat, but as preparation, not as selfishness, but as sacred responsibility. Because when they are nourished, their presence heals effortlessly. When they are grounded, their energy uplifts naturally. They no longer need to prove their worth through exhaustion. Each act of rest becomes a small rebellion against the old lie that love requires suffering. Each act of gentleness toward themselves becomes an offering to the part of them that once believed they had to earn everything. And with every boundary honored, every guilt dissolved, every breath taken fully, The healer feels something they haven't felt in years: balance. They finally understand that wholeness isn't built by doing more. It's born from remembering that they, too, are worthy of the love they've always given away. There comes a day when the healer wakes, and the air feels different, lighter, cleaner, as though the world has exhaled. The exhaustion that once clung to them has loosened. The ache to be needed has quieted. For the first time in years, they feel love rising in them again, not as obligation, not as pressure, but as something pure and gentle. It feels like sunlight touching still water. They begin to understand that real compassion doesn't demand their exhaustion. It doesn't beg to be proved through pain. It simply is. It flows naturally, without the tightness of expectation or the fear of being unappreciated. This new love, this clean love, is born not from emptiness but from fullness. It's a love that no longer tries to rescue. It simply allows. The healer starts to see others differently. They no longer feel the need to fix everyone they meet. When they see pain, they don't rush in with solutions. They sit beside it, quietly, respectfully. They understand now that presence itself can be healing, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for another soul is to trust their strength instead of saving them from it. In this stillness, compassion begins to breathe again. It's no longer tangled in guilt or driven by fear. It doesn't try to prove worth or earn belonging. It flows easily, like a river returning to its natural course. The healer realizes that they can care deeply without carrying everything. They can love freely without losing themselves. There is peace in this kind of love, a steady warmth that neither burns out nor demands attention. When they help someone now, it's not to feel useful. It's because their heart simply overflows. When they say no, it's not from anger, but from understanding. And when they give, it comes from a place of abundance, not depletion. They find beauty in balance, in knowing when to reach out and when to let go. They learn that empathy doesn't mean absorbing someone else's pain, but seeing it clearly without letting it consume them. Love, they realize, is not sacrifice, it's integrity. It's truth meeting truth without disguise. The healer feels lighter. Their smile isn't a mask anymore. It's real, unforced. Their hands, once tired from holding everyone else together, now create, rest, and give with joy. They begin to rediscover the simple pleasures of being a walk at dusk. Laughter that comes easily. The quiet comfort of solitude. This is what compassion was meant to be, not a cage, but a current. A living, breathing energy that connects, but does not confine. And in this rebirth, the healer finally sees the beauty of what love can be, when it's no longer bound by fear. It's gentle, clear, whole. It asks for nothing, demands nothing, and yet it heals everything it touches, including the heart that once believed it had to break to prove it cared. The healer moves through the world differently now. There is a stillness in them that wasn't there before, not the stillness of exhaustion, but of peace. They no longer reach for every outstretched hand in desperation to save. They no longer chase the broken, no longer lose themselves in the stories of others. Instead, when they meet someone's pain, they do something far more powerful. They stay present. They listen. They reflect. They have learned that real healing doesn't come from fixing. It comes from witnessing. Once, they believed their worth depended on how much pain they could absorb. Now they understand that everyone carries their own sacred journey, that no one can walk it for them. So instead of rescuing, the healer becomes a mirror, calm, steady, honest. When someone stands before them in suffering, they don't fill the silence with advice or comfort. They hold space, a space wide enough for truth to breathe. And in that stillness, something beautiful happens. The other person begins to see themselves clearly, maybe for the first time. They begin to notice the strength that was always there, hidden beneath the noise of fear and shame. The healer watches this unfold with quiet awe. There's no need to interfere, no urge to control. Their heart is open, but their boundaries remain strong. They know now that to truly love someone is to trust their ability to heal, to see them not as fragile, but as capable. It feels strange at first, this new kind of compassion. It doesn't give the same rush the old saviorhood did. It's slower, softer, deeper. It requires patience, the kind that doesn't try to hurry another soul's process. But it's also cleaner, freer. There's no exhaustion at the end, no resentment hidden under the surface, just peace. Sometimes, they see their old self in the eyes of those they helped that same desperation to fix, that same fear of being unneeded. And instead of judging it, they smile. They understand now. They've been there. They know the pain of confusing love with rescue, empathy with control. And so they offer something their younger self never received: compassion without demand. They realize now that being a mirror is not passive. It's the most sacred act of all. It's saying, I see you, I trust you, I believe in your light, even when you can't yet. It's allowing others to meet their reflection and discover that they already carry everything they've been searching for. And when they walk away from those moments, they feel lighter, not because they've healed someone, but because they've honored them. The healer's gift has changed shape. It no longer drains them. It illuminates. They finally understand that true healing doesn't happen through saving others. It happens when two souls stand in honesty, one reflecting, the other remembering, until both recognize the same quiet truth. The light was never missing. It was only waiting to be seen. When the healer finally steps back into the world, it feels both new and familiar, like walking through a place they once loved but are seeing with fresh eyes. The noise is still there, the chaos, the endless tides of other people's emotions, but something within them has changed. They no longer drown in it. They move through it gently, like a leaf carried by the river instead of fighting against the current. They re-enter life, not as the savior they once tried to be, but as something simpler, truer, a soul in balance. Their presence, once filled with strain and striving, now carries quiet steadiness. They don't speak as much, but when they do, their words seem to come from somewhere deeper. People still come to them, drawn to their calm, but now the healer doesn't absorb their pain. They listen, they reflect, and then they let go. What they offer isn't fixing, it's space. The world feels softer through this new lens. Ordinary things shimmer again: morning light, laughter, wind brushing against the face. They begin to see that peace isn't something found in isolation. It's something carried within, something that moves with them wherever they go. They start reconnecting, not from guilt or duty, but from genuine joy. Conversations feel lighter. Relationships grow honest. They don't hide behind care anymore, and they don't apologize for their boundaries. Their love is no longer stretched thin across everyone who asks for it. It's whole, centered, and grounded in truth. And strangely, people feel it. There's something healing about being around someone who doesn't try to fix you, who simply allows you to be. The healer has become that kind of presence, not performing compassion, but embodying it. Their energy no longer pulls or pushes. It simply is. Sometimes, the old urges still stir the instinct to rescue, to overextend, to say yes when they mean no. But now, they catch it. They smile at it. They breathe through it. They've learned to listen to themselves first, to honor the quiet knowing that their own well-being is the foundation for any good they bring to others. They begin to serve again, but differently. Their work, their words, their love all carry a new vibration, calm strength, instead of frantic giving. They've discovered that their greatest medicine was never in doing, but in being, in presence, in truth. The healer walks through crowded places now and feels no urge to carry the world. They know every soul has its own rhythm, its own lessons, its own timing. Their role is not to save, but to shine, to remind others of what balance looks like. And so they move through the world quietly radiant, no longer a reservoir for pain, but a mirror for peace. Their presence itself becomes their offering, effortless, authentic, whole. And wherever they go, the air seems to still, as if the universe recognizes one of its own, finally at rest, within themselves. Love once meant losing themselves. That's how the healer was taught to give, to bend, to pour out, until there was nothing left. They believed that love was measured by how much they could sacrifice, how far they could stretch, how deeply they could feel another's pain. But now, standing on the other side of all that unlearning, they begin to see love for what it truly is, not surrender of self, but union through truth. It surprises them, this new kind of love. It's quieter, less dramatic. It doesn't demand exhaustion or self-erasure. It doesn't burn or consume. Instead, it feels spacious, like two souls standing side by side, each complete, each free. The healer begins to understand that love isn't about merging into someone else's story. It's about walking beside them while still honoring their own. They notice how natural it feels to stay whole now. When they listen, they no longer lose themselves in the other person's emotions. When they give, it's from abundance, not obligation. They no longer chase connection by abandoning themselves. Love, they realize, is not found in becoming small. It's found in being seen exactly as you are. This discovery brings a strange peace. They no longer fear love the way they used to, no longer associate it with depletion or dependency. Love now feels like balance, giving and receiving, strength and softness, closeness and freedom. They begin to see that love is not meant to complete what's missing, but to celebrate what's whole. Sometimes, they think of their old ways, the endless giving, the quiet resentment that followed, the aching loneliness hidden beneath the smile. That love was all-reaching and no resting. It was love without roots. But now, the healer stands firm in their own center. They can open their heart without losing their ground. They meet others differently now. They don't search for someone to heal or someone to fill the empty spaces inside them. Instead, they are drawn to those who also know solitude, who also know the sacredness of their own being. There is no rescuing here, no begging to be seen, just two lights, side by side, neither dimming for the other. They begin to understand that love is a paradox because it requires both surrender and strength. It asks you to open your heart without losing your shape, to give without forgetting to receive, to hold another close while still honoring the quiet world within you. And when the healer feels this kind of love clean, balanced, free, they realize it was never love that hurt them. It was the way they misunderstood it. Love was never meant to erase the self. It was meant to reveal it. Now, they walk through the world with an open heart and steady feet, proof that true love doesn't ask you to fade. It asks you to stay. There comes a morning when the healer wakes and feels an unfamiliar peace in their chest. Not the kind that comes after helping someone else, but the kind that comes from being whole within themselves. For the first time in their life, they don't wake up thinking about who needs them. They don't reach for someone else's pain before feeling their own heartbeat. The world is quiet, gentle, still, and in that stillness, something profound unfolds. The healer has become the healed. It doesn't happen all at once. Healing is never a single sunrise. It's a slow, returning, a remembering of what was always there. They begin to notice the small ways they care for themselves now. Eating when hungry, resting without apology, speaking honestly, saying no without guilt. These are simple acts, but to the healer, they feel sacred. Each one is a soft rebellion against the years they believed they had to earn their worth through giving. They realize that their greatest medicine was never what they offered others. It wasn't their empathy or their wisdom or their patience. It was what they'd been searching for all along, the ability to turn love inward, the strength to look at themselves with the same gentleness they gave everyone else. Now, when they stand in front of a mirror, they no longer see the exhausted savior or the broken caretaker. They see a soul who has walked through fire and come out golden. The lines of weariness on their face no longer look like scars, they look like stories, proof that they've lived, learned, and returned home to themselves. There are still days when they feel tired, when old patterns whisper temptations of overgiving, of pleasing, of rescuing. But now they meet those moments with compassion, not criticism. They've learned that being healed doesn't mean never breaking again. It means knowing how to hold yourself gently when you do. The healer begins to live differently. Their relationships become balanced, rooted in truth rather than need. Their presence feels lighter, freer. People still find comfort in them, but it's no longer because they absorb others' pain. It's because they embody calm, a living reminder that peace is possible. They start to create again, not out of obligation, but out of joy, music, writing, laughter, quiet moments beneath the sky. Every act of creation feels like a prayer of gratitude to the life that once felt too heavy to carry. They realize they no longer need to fix the world to feel at peace within it. Their healing has become their offering. And in that understanding, they finally grasp the truth that had waited beneath every lesson, every heartbreak, every act of care. They were never just meant to heal others. They were meant to remember that they, too, are worthy of the same love, tenderness, and protection they've given away so freely. Now, when they give, it comes from overflow. When they love, it comes from truth. And when they rest, it's not escape, it's reverence. The healer has come home not as a savior, but as someone finally saved by their own love. It happens softly, almost without the healer noticing. One day, they simply realize that the ache is gone, that the constant pull between giving and losing, between helping and hurting, has finally fallen silent. The war inside them has ended. What once felt like a curse, this endless need to heal, to carry, to save, now feels like a blessing wrapped in wisdom. Compassion hasn't disappeared. It has deepened. It has learned its balance. They walk through life differently now. There's no rush in their step, no weight in their chest. When someone comes to them in pain, they listen with an open heart, but they don't absorb it. When they see suffering, they care without collapsing. Love still moves through them freely, tenderly, but now it includes them too. They are part of their own circle of care. They understand that healing was never about fixing the world. It was about remembering the truth beneath it, that love can only flow cleanly through a whole vessel. And so, they've become that vessel, open, grounded, strong. Their compassion no longer bleeds, it breathes. Their empathy no longer drains, it connects. Their giving no longer empties, it renews. The healer's life becomes simple in the most beautiful way. They savor stillness. They find joy in the ordinary, a quiet morning, a soft light, the sound of rain. Every moment feels like a prayer without words. There's no striving anymore, no desperate longing to be enough. They are enough. They have always been enough. When people meet them now, they feel something different. It's not the magnetism of a rescuer, but the calm of someone who has made peace with themselves. Others leave their presence lighter, not because they were fixed, but because they were seen. The healer's wholeness reflects the possibility of wholeness in everyone. In the end, this was what the curse had always been trying to teach, that love, to be real, must include the self. That compassion without self-love is martyrdom, but compassion with self-love is grace. The healer finally understands that the two were never meant to be separate. They are the inhale and exhale of the same sacred breath. As they stand beneath the evening sky, feeling the rhythm of life flow through them, the healer whispers a quiet thank you to the pain that shaped them, to the lessons that freed them, to the version of themselves who never gave up. The curse has dissolved, not because they stopped caring, but because they learned to care truthfully, to love others without leaving themselves behind. And so, the story ends where it was always leading, with a heart both open and whole. The healer has become the healed. Their presence alone brings peace, not because they give everything away, but because they finally understand that in wholeness, all are healed.